The boundary between freedom and captivity on the American frontier was as fragile as morning mist over the mountains. For Eleanor Blackwood, that boundary shattered when her father's desperate death forced her into bondage to save his life. What happens when a proud, educated woman is handed to an Apache chief as payment? And what transformation begins when instead of chains, he offers her dignity? The tremors of this unlikely alliance would soon shake the very foundations of the new Mexico territory. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The New Mexico Territory, 1875. The sun burned mercilessly over the parched landscape, painting shadows across the cracked earth that hadn't seen rain in 62 days. Eleanor Blackwood stood at the window of her father's small trading post, watching dust devils dance across the barren yard. At 25, with fiery auburn hair and eyes that reflected the desert sky, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied their increasingly desperate circumstances. "Eleanor, come help me with these ledgers," her father called weakly from his desk. Samuel Blackwood had once been a respected businessman in Boston before consumption claimed his wife and financial ruin drove them west. Now his once powerful frame was bent with illness and worry, his hands trembling as he pored over columns of numbers that refused to balance. Eleanor crossed the room, her practical dress rustling against the rough wooden floor. The trading post, once moderately successful, now stood as a monument to their fading fortunes. Drought had driven away many settlers, and those who remained had little to trade beyond promises. "The situation is worse than I thought," Samuel admitted, his voice barely audible. "Matthews is coming tomorrow for the money we owe him." "All of it?" Eleanor's heart sank. Robert Matthews, the wealthiest man in Silver Creek, had loaned them money when the bank refused. His terms had been harsh but necessary for her father's medicine. "How much time do we have?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "None." Samuel pushed a paper toward her, his eyes unable to meet hers. "If we can't pay, he takes the trading post. Everything." Everything included the small plot where her mother was buried. Everything included their only means of survival in this unforgiving territory. "We'll find a way, Father," Eleanor said, with more confidence than she felt. Her education, unusual for a woman on the frontier, had been her mother's dying wish, but fine literature and mathematics offered little solution to their current predicament. Later that evening, as her father slept fitfully in the back room, Eleanor sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of purple and gold. The beauty of this harsh land had once captivated her. Now it seemed a cruel witness to their impending ruin. The sound of approaching riders broke the evening silence. Eleanor straightened, reaching for the rifle they kept by the door. Visitors after dark rarely brought good news. 5 men emerged from the gathering dusk, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. At their center rode Robert Matthews, his substantial frame draped in expensive Eastern clothing that seemed absurdly out of place against the desert backdrop. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, his hat wide-brimmed and pristine, all calculated to emphasize his position as Silver Creek's most important citizen. "Miss Blackwood," he called, dismounting with surprising agility for a man of his size. "I apologize for the late hour. Business couldn't wait until morning." Eleanor kept her hand near the rifle. "My father is resting, Mr. Matthews. He's been unwell, so I've heard." Matthews gestured to his companions to wait as he approached the porch. "That's partly why I've come early, to offer a solution before things become unpleasant." Something in his tone sent a chill down Eleanor's spine despite the lingering heat of the day. "What kind of solution?" she asked cautiously. Matthews removed his hat, feigning the manners of a gentleman. "Your father owes me a considerable sum. A sum you both know you cannot repay." Eleanor remained silent, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of acknowledging their desperation. "However," he continued, "I'm not an unreasonable man. I have no desire to see a sick man and his daughter thrown to the wilderness." His eyes traveled over Eleanor in a way that made her skin crawl. "There are alternatives. We'll need more." "Time to raise the money," Eleanor countered. "The drought will end. Trade will resume." Matthew's laugh cut her off. "Time is a luxury neither of us has, Miss Blackwood. Your father's debt increases with each passing day, and my patience has limits." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There's talk of Apache raids to the south. Settlers are nervous. The cavalry is stretched thin." He gestured to the vulnerable. "Trading post, you're isolated here, unprotected." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The threat was thinly veiled. Eleanor's hand tightened on the rifle. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Matthews?" His smile never reached his eyes. "A business arrangement. I forgive your father's debt entirely, and in exchange." "In exchange?" Eleanor prompted, though she already suspected what was coming. "You come to Silver Creek as my wife." The words hung in the air between them. "Not a proposal, a transaction." "My father would never agree," Eleanor said firmly. Matthews shrugged. "Perhaps not. But when faced with losing everything, with nowhere to go, with his illness worsening," he left the sentence unfinished. "Consider it carefully, Miss Blackwood. I offer security, position, comfort. Many women would be grateful." Eleanor's response was interrupted by the sound of her father's cough from inside. Matthews replaced his hat with the satisfaction of a man who knew he held all the cards. "I'll return tomorrow for your answer," he said, turning back toward his horse. "For your father's sake, I hope it's the sensible one." After Matthews and his men departed, Eleanor leaned against the porch post, her heart racing. The choice before her seemed impossible: sacrifice her freedom to save her father, or maintain her independence and watch him lose everything. She was still sitting there when dawn painted the eastern sky in pale pink. Exhaustion and worry had left dark circles beneath her eyes, but determination had hardened within her. There had to be another way. Samuel found her there, his face grave when she explained Matthew's visit. "Absolutely not," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I would rather live in a tent than see you forced into marriage with that man." "We may not have a choice, Father," Eleanor replied. "Winter is coming. Your health. My health is not worth your future." He took her hands in his. "Your mother would never forgive me." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats, not from the direction of Silver Creek, but from the north, along the old trading route that led toward Apache territory. Eleanor shielded her eyes against the morning sun, watching as 3 riders approached. Unlike Matthew's well-dressed entourage, these riders moved with the natural grace of those born to the saddle, their forms seeming one with their mounts. "Apache," Samuel whispered, reaching for his rifle. "Wait," Eleanor cautioned. "They're not riding like raiders." As the riders drew closer, Eleanor could distinguish their leader, a tall figure wearing a combination of traditional Apache garments and items clearly acquired through trade. Across his chest were leather straps holding what appeared to be a cavalry officer's binoculars. His face, framed by 2 long braids wrapped in leather, bore the dignified expression of a man accustomed to command. The traders who survived in these territories maintained cautious relationships with certain Apache bands. The Blackwoods had occasionally traded with groups from the north, exchanging metal tools and cloth for furs and herbs. But such encounters had become rare as tensions increased between settlers and native peoples. The Apache riders stopped a respectful distance from the trading post. Their leader raised his empty hands in the universal sign of peaceful intent. "What do we do?" Samuel asked, His breath labored from the exertion of standing too quickly. Eleanor made a decision. We trade. We need anything of value before Matthews returns. Ignoring her father's protests, Eleanor stepped off the porch and walked forward with deliberate calm. Years of living on the frontier had taught her that showing fear often invited the very danger you sought to avoid. Welcome to Blackwood Trading. Post, she called, stopping several yards from the riders. What do you seek to trade today? The Apache leader studied her with intense dark eyes that missed nothing. Not the rifle held casually but ready in her hands. Not the signs of a struggling outpost. Not the proud set of her shoulders despite their circumstances. I am Kianata, he said in surprisingly good English. Chief of the Shadow Water People. He gestured to his companions. We come to trade medicine plants for metal tools. Eleanor nodded, maintaining her composed exterior while her mind raced. Any fair trade would bring them nowhere near the Vivardere. Some they needed for Matthews, but it was better than nothing. We have tools, she confirmed. Show me your medicines. Kianata dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his impressive height. Unlike the stereotypes perpetuated in Silver Creek, there was nothing savage in his bearing, only a composed dignity that commanded respect. Up close, Eleanor noticed a long scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, and the lines of experience around his eyes that suggested he was perhaps 40 years old. He removed a leather pouch from his saddle and approached, his movements measured to avoid appearing threatening. His companions remained mounted, watchful but not hostile. When he opened the pouch, the rich aroma of dried herbs filled the air between them. Eleanor recognized some from her mother's old medicine book, plants that fetched high prices from doctors in larger settlements. These are valuable, she acknowledged. What tools do you seek in exchange? Their negotiation proceeded with the formal rhythm of frontier trade, each party respectful but protective of their interests. Eleanor found Kianata to be fair but shrewd, his knowledge of the true value of both European goods and native medicines extensive. As they concluded their business, the sound of riders approaching from the direction of Silver Creek caught everyone's attention. Kianata's warriors immediately tensed, hands moving to weapons. More traders? Kianata asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Not traders, Eleanor replied grimly, and not friends. Matthews and his men appeared over the rise, stopping abruptly at the sight of the Apache. The atmosphere shifted instantly from tension to potential violence. Several of Matthews' men reached for their weapons. Miss Blackwood, Matthews called, his voice hard. Step away from those savages immediately. Eleanor didn't move. They are peaceful traders, Mr. Matthews. We've concluded our business. Matthews' face darkened with anger. Consorting with Indians now? Perhaps I should reconsider my generous offer. Kianata watched this exchange with keen interest, understanding more than either Eleanor or Matthews realized. He spoke quietly. To Eleanor in English, "This man threatens you?" Before she could answer, Matthews urged his horse forward, flanked by his men. I've come for your decision, Blackwood. The debt must be settled today, one way or another. Samuel emerged from the trading post, struggling to stand straight. We're gathering what we can, Matthews. Give us until the end of the week. That wasn't our agreement, Matthews replied coldly. It's today, or I take everything. Eleanor felt trapped between two forces, Matthews' cruel avarice and the unpredictable presence of the Apache. In desperation, an idea formed, dangerous. Possibly foolish, but perhaps their only option. Chief Kianata, she said, turning to the Apache leader. Would your people value more tools like these? Metal axes, knives, cooking pots? Kianata nodded slowly. Such things are useful, hard to find. Eleanor took a deep breath. We have many more inside. And fabric, beads, other goods your people might want. She gestured toward Matthews. This man seeks to take our trading post because of a debt. If you were to trade something of great value, we could pay him and continue to provide goods to your people." Matthews laughed dismissively. "You think these savages carry enough to cover your debt? Don't be absurd, woman." Kianata's expression remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed slightly at Matthew's tone. He spoke to his companions in rapid Apache, then turned back to Eleanor. "How much is this debt?" When Eleanor named the sum, Matthews smirked clearly, believing no Apache could possibly understand such an amount, much less possess it. To everyone's surprise, Kianata reached beneath his shirt and withdrew a small leather pouch. From it, he removed several gold coins, Spanish doubloons from a time before American settlement. "This covers the debt?" he asked, holding them in his palm. Matthew's expression changed instantly from derision to acquisitive hunger. Even from a distance, the gold's value was obvious, far exceeding what the Blackwoods owed. "Where did you get those?" Matthews demanded, suddenly interested. Kianata ignored him, speaking only to Eleanor. "These coins for all trading goods." "Inside, and something more." "What more?" Eleanor asked, hope and wariness mingling in her chest. Kianata pointed directly at her. "You, to come teach our children the white man's words and numbers, for one cycle of seasons." The request stunned Eleanor. Women taken by Apache were the subject of terrifying stories throughout the territory, though she had always questioned how many such tales were truth and how many were meant to justify violence against native peoples. Matthews recovered quickly, seeing an opportunity. "The girl is already promised to me as payment," he declared. "But I might consider releasing her from that obligation, for all of that gold." Samuel moved forward with surprising speed. "No, Eleanor is not part of any transaction." But Eleanor was thinking rapidly. A year with the Apache would be dangerous, unknown, but it would free them from Matthews and save the trading post. Teaching was something she could do well, and a year would give her father time to rebuild their business. "Wait," she said, raising her hand. "Let me understand exactly what's being proposed." Kianata met her gaze directly. "You come to our winter camp, teach our children, help us understand white man's papers. After 1 year, you return here with escort." "And she would be treated how?" Samuel demanded. "As honored teacher," Kianata replied, "with protection of the chief." Matthews scoffed. "You can't seriously be considering trusting an Apache, Blackwood. They're animals, not men of their word." Eleanor noticed how Kianata's jaw tightened at these words, though his expression remained controlled. She had a sudden insight that his understanding of English might be more comprehensive than he had revealed. "I accept," she said firmly, before anyone could speak further. "Eleanor," her father protested. "Father, this solves everything," she replied, taking his hands. "The debt will be paid. You keep the trading post. I'll be teaching, not." She glanced at Matthews. "Not trapped in a loveless marriage. You'd rather be a slave to savages?" Matthews sneered. Kianata stepped forward, his presence suddenly filling the space between them. "She will not be slave. She will be respected teacher, protected guest." He fixed Matthews with a stare that made the older man step back involuntarily. "Unlike your intentions, traitor." The implication was clear. Kianata had understood exactly what Matthews was proposing. The standoff continued for several tense moments. Finally, Matthews' greed won out over his anger. "Fine," he spat. "The gold for the debt. What the girl does with herself after is no concern of mine." The transaction was completed with cold efficiency. Kianata handed over coins worth far more than the debt, while Matthews wrote out a receipt declaring the obligation fulfilled. Eleanor suspected the Apache chief couldn't read the document, but he treated it with the seriousness of any contract. As Matthews and his men prepared to leave, he leaned down from his saddle toward Eleanor. "You've made a grave mistake, Miss Blackwood. When they tire of you, if they don't kill you first, don't expect Silver Creek to welcome you back." "I never expected anything from Silver Creek except prejudice and greed, Mr. Matthews," Eleanor replied calmly. "You haven't disappointed me." After Matthews departed, Samuel embraced his daughter with desperate strength. "You can't do this, Eleanor. These stories about women taken by Apache are likely as truthful as everything else we hear in Silver Creek," she interrupted gently. "Father, I'll be teaching. It's what Mother always wanted from me, to use my education." "Not like this," he whispered. Kianata had stepped away during their exchange, giving them privacy. Now he approached again. "The woman decides for herself," he said firmly. "Not father, not other man." He looked directly at Eleanor. "You can still refuse. Keep the gold. We find another teacher." His willingness to honor her choice, when both Matthews and even her father sought to decide for her, strengthened Eleanor's resolve. "I've made my decision," she said. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn," Kianata replied. "Bring warm clothes. Books for teaching. Small personal things." He gestured toward the mountains to the north. 4 days' ride to winter camp. That night, as Eleanor packed a small bundle of possessions, her father made one last attempt to dissuade her. "There must be another way," he insisted, his voice breaking. "I could try the bank in Santa Fe again." "And leave me to Matthews in the meantime?" Eleanor shook her head. "This is the better choice, Father. Chief Kianata seems honorable. He values education for his people. That says much about his character." "You can't judge a man's character in one brief meeting," Samuel warned. Eleanor placed her mother's worn Bible in her pack. "Perhaps not. But I saw how he treats his men, how they respond to him. I saw his restraint when Matthews insulted him." She closed the pack decisively. "And I saw a leader who offered me respect when the so-called civilized man from town saw me as property." Samuel had no answer for this truth. Dawn arrived with the golden light that made the desert seem almost kind. Kianata and his warriors returned as promised, accompanied now by a woman, the first female Apache Eleanor had seen up close. She was perhaps a few years older than Eleanor, with a dignified bearing and intelligent eyes. "Better than expected," Eleanor admitted, accepting what appeared to be a porridge of unfamiliar grains mixed with dried berries. The taste was earthy but not unpleasant. "Today you meet children," Nita explained, settling cross-legged across. "From Eleanor, 10 young ones ready for learning. Some speak small English words, most only Apache." The challenge of teaching students with whom she shared almost no common language suddenly felt overwhelming. How am I to teach them if we cannot understand each other? Nita smiled. "I help. Some days I translate. You learn Apache words, they learn English words. Both sides walk toward middle." The wisdom in this approach struck Eleanor. Both sides walk toward middle. So different from Silver Creek's expectation that native people should abandon their ways entirely. After finishing her breakfast, Eleanor retrieved her small bundle of possessions. Among them was a slate and chalk, a primer of basic English, her mother's Bible, and a journal she'd kept since childhood. Limited tools for the task ahead, but they would have to suffice. Nita led her through the camp, which appeared both foreign and strangely familiar in the morning light. Women worked at cooking fires or scraped hides stretched on wooden frames. Some paused to watch her pass, their expressions ranging from open curiosity to guarded suspicion. Children darted between dwellings, some stopping to stare before being called back by parents. They approached a structure larger than the other wickiups, with sides that could be rolled up to allow light and air. Inside, simple mats were arranged in a semicircle. Beyond them stood Kianata, speaking with an elderly woman whose silver-streaked hair was bound in a traditional style. "Grandmother's son," Nita introduced her. "She is keeper of stories for our people. She asked to see your teaching." The older Woman's face was deeply lined, a map of decades lived close to the elements. But her eyes were sharp, intelligent, assessing Eleanor with neither hostility nor welcome, merely evaluation. "I am honored," Eleanor said, bowing her head slightly. "In respect." Grandmother's son spoke in Apache, her voice carrying the rhythms of a natural storyteller. Nita translated. "She says our stories keep us Apache. Your stories make you white woman. She wishes to know if stories can live together without one killing the other." The profound nature of the question took Eleanor aback. It cut to the heart of what her presence here meant, not just teaching letters and numbers, but representing an entirely different worldview. "Please tell her I believe different stories can exist side by side, like trees in a forest," Eleanor responded carefully. "Each with its own roots, but sharing the same earth, the same sky." When Nita translated, Grandmother Sun's weathered face remained impassive, but she nodded once before speaking again. "She says you have a poet's tongue. She will watch too. See if your heart matches your words." Before Eleanor could respond, the first children began arriving, ushered in by mothers who regarded Eleanor with varying degrees of interest and concern. The children themselves, ranging from perhaps 5 to 12 years old, displayed the universal mix of excitement and apprehension that Eleanor had seen in every classroom. Kianata addressed them briefly in Apache, his tone gentle but commanding. The children settled onto the mats, their dark eyes fixed on Eleanor with unabashed curiosity. "I have told them you come from far to share knowledge," he explained to Eleanor. "That you will teach them to understand white man's words and numbers, so they may walk safely in both worlds when they are grown." The responsibility of this mission settled on Eleanor's shoulders. These children's future ability to navigate an increasingly complicated world might well depend on what she could teach them. "Thank you," she said to Kianata. "I will do my best for them." He nodded. "Once, I know this." With that simple statement of confidence, he departed, leaving Eleanor facing her new students. For a moment, uncertainty paralyzed her. How to begin with children who spoke almost no English? Then her teacher's instincts took over. She smiled, touching her chest. "Eleanor," she said clearly, then gestured to them collectively. "Teacher." She pointed to the first child, a boy of about 8 with bright, intelligent eyes. After a moment's hesitation, he touched his own chest. "Tarak." One by one, the children offered their names. Tariq, Lilu, Akul, Dazan, Harit, Natan, Noshi. Odina, Tarragan, and the youngest, a solemn 5-year-old girl named Alu, who spoke so softly Eleanor had to lean forward to hear her. With the first barrier broken, Eleanor proceeded with simple concepts. She drew the sun on her slate, said, "Sun," clearly, then pointed to the actual sunlight streaming through the open sides of the structure. The children repeated the word, some giggling at their own pronunciation. By midday, they had learned 10 English words: sun, sky, earth, water, tree, hand, eye, heart, boy, girl. Eleanor had learned the Apache equivalents, her tongue stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds to the children's obvious amusement. As the children departed for the midday meal, Nita approached. "You do well," she observed. "Children already speak of the teacher with fire hair." Eleanor laughed, touching her auburn locks self-consciously. "A simple beginning, but a beginning. Nonetheless." "All journeys start with one step," Nita agreed. "Come, eat with my family." Nita led her to a cooking fire where several women were preparing the meal. Eleanor was introduced to Nita's mother, a pony, and her younger sister, Kimi. Their welcome seemed cautious but not unfriendly. As they ate a stew of rabbit and wild roots, Eleanor became aware of tension in the camp. Warriors were gathering near the largest wickiup, their expressions grave. Kianata moved among them, his usual calm demeanor replaced by alertness. "What's happening?" Eleanor asked Nita quietly. Nita's expression darkened. "Scouts return with news." Bluecoat soldiers move near our hunting grounds. The U.S. cavalry. Eleanor felt a chill despite the warm day. The complex politics between the army, settlers, and Apache bands was something. She understood only vaguely from newspaper accounts she now recognized as hopelessly biased. Are they looking for your people specifically? Nita shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. Soldiers see all Apache same. Not care which band fights. Which band keeps peace. This injustice struck Eleanor forcefully. The Shadow Water people clearly lived peacefully, yet they might be punished for actions of entirely different Apache groups. After the meal, Eleanor returned to her teaching area to prepare for the afternoon session. To her surprise, grandmother son was waiting, seated on one of the children's mats. The elders spoke in Apache, gesturing for Eleanor to sit opposite her. Without Nita to translate, Eleanor was uncertain what was expected, but she complied, settling cross-legged on a mat. Grandmother's son reached into a pouch at her waist and withdrew what appeared to be a handful of small bones or sticks. With practiced movements, she cast them onto the ground between them, then studied their arrangement with intense concentration. After several moments, she looked up at Eleanor, her weathered face solemn. She pointed to the pattern formed by the casting, then to Eleanor, then made a circular motion with her finger that encompassed the entire camp. Though no words passed between them, Eleanor sensed the elder was communicating something significant about her presence among the Shadow Water people. Whether it was warning or welcome, she couldn't tell. Grandmother's son gathered her divination tools and rose with surprising grace for her years. Before departing, she placed one gnarled hand briefly on Eleanor's head in what felt like a blessing or perhaps a benediction. The afternoon teaching session progressed much like the morning, though Eleanor noticed the children seemed more relaxed, more willing to attempt the strange new words. Young Elu, the quietest child, surprised everyone by forming nearly perfect English sentences after hearing them just once. She has gift for languages, Nita explained when she stopped by. Grandmother's son says Elu's spirit remembers many tongues from before. The concept of spirits remembering past lives was foreign to Eleanor's Christian upbringing, but she found herself respecting the belief rather than dismissing it as superstition. Elu's facility with language was remarkable by any measure. As the day's lessons concluded, Eleanor felt a tentative satisfaction. Small steps had been taken, connections begun. The children departed with new words on their tongues, and she with new Apache terms in her memory. She was organizing her few teaching materials when Kianata entered the structure. His expression was troubled, his usual composure strained. "Walk with me," he requested. They moved away from the center of camp toward a small stream that fed into the larger creek. The burble of water over stones provided privacy for their conversation. Soldiers' Camp 3 days ride south, Kianata began without preamble. Cavalry patrol. They searched for Apache who raided settler farm near Silver Creek. Eleanor felt a flutter of alarm. "Was it your people?" Kianata's expression hardened. "No, Shadow Water keeps peace agreement. 3 years no raids, no war." He picked up a stone, turning it over in his powerful hands. "But Bluecoats see all Apache same, all guilty." "That's unjust," Eleanor said. "Many things unjust between your people and mine." His voice carried no accusation, merely statement. "Of fact, this why teaching important. Children must know both worlds to survive what comes." "What will you do about the patrol?" Kianata skipped the stone across the water. "Send messengers. Remind army of peace agreement. Show we are not hiding. Is that safe?" Eleanor asked, concerned. "Safer than hiding. Hiding looks guilty." He turned to face her directly. "But patrol brings danger for you too." "For me? Why?" "White woman living with Apache. Soldiers will think captive, not teacher. Try to rescue even if you refuse." His dark eyes held hers. "Some will say, I keep you against will. The implication was clear. Her presence could be used as justification for action against the Shadow Water people, regardless of the truth. "What can I do?" Eleanor asked. "Be seen as teacher, not captive." Kianata considered for a moment. "Write letter. Explain you are here by choice. My messengers will carry to patrol commander." That evening, by the light of her small fire, Eleanor composed the letter. She chose her words carefully, explaining her agreement with Chief Kianata, her role as teacher, and explicitly stating that she remained with the Shadow Water Band voluntarily. As she wrote, the enormity of her situation struck her anew. In just days, her life had transformed completely. She was no longer simply Eleanor Blackwood, struggling daughter of a failing trader, but a bridge between worlds, her presence carrying political weight she had never anticipated. The following morning, 2 warriors departed with her letter, riding south toward the cavalry patrol. The camp settled into an uneasy waiting pattern, scouts positioned at strategic points to provide warning of any approach. Despite the tension, Eleanor continued her teaching. The children seemed largely unaware of the adults' concerns, arriving each day eager to learn new words and concepts. By the end of the first week, they had mastered basic greetings, simple counting, and the names of common objects. Eleanor found herself learning as much as she taught. Nita and occasionally Grandmother Seeing would join the sessions, offering Apache words and concepts that had no direct English equivalent. The children delighted in Eleanor's attempts to pronounce these terms, giggling when she stumbled over the unfamiliar sounds. 10 days after the messengers departed, they returned with troubling news. The patrol commander had received Eleanor's letter but remained skeptical. He demanded to see her in person to confirm she was not under duress. Kianata called a council to discuss this development. Eleanor was invited to attend, an honor that signified her growing acceptance within the community. The council met in the largest wickiup, with tribal elders seated in a circle around a small central fire. The discussion was conducted primarily in Apache, with Nita translating the key points for Eleanor. Opinions varied widely. Some warriors advocated moving deeper into the mountains to avoid confrontation, while others argued for standing their ground. Makia, the medicine man who had initially opposed Eleanor's presence, spoke at length. Though she couldn't understand his words, his gestures and tone suggested he believed the situation confirmed his warnings about allowing a white woman into their midst. When the various viewpoints had been expressed, all eyes turned to Kianata. As chief, the final decision rested with him. "We cannot run," he said in English, clearly intending Eleanor to understand directly. "Running makes us look guilty. We have done nothing wrong," he surveyed the gathered elders. "But we must be careful. Soldiers sometimes shoot first, ask questions after." He turned to Eleanor. "I will take you to meet patrol commander with small group of warriors. Show we have nothing to hide." Eleanor nodded, both relieved and apprehensive. "I'll make it clear that I'm here by choice." "It may not matter," one of the elder warriors said in halting English. "Some soldiers want reason to fight, not reason for peace." The truth of this statement hung heavy in the air. The following dawn, Eleanor prepared for the journey. She dressed in her most proper attire, a simple but well-made dress she had saved for teaching. Nita helped her arrange her hair in a neat bun, understanding instinctively that Eleanor needed to appear as composed and civilized as possible. "You speak with strong heart," Nita advised as they worked. "Show no fear." "I'm not afraid for myself," Eleanor admitted. "I'm afraid for what might happen to your people if I don't convince the commander." Nita's hands stilled for a moment. "This why Kiana bring you to us. You see Apache as people, not enemies." She secured the final pin in Eleanor's hair. Many whites never see this truth. Kianata had selected 5 warriors to accompany them, enough to show respect for himself as chief, but not so many as to appear threatening to the cavalry. They rode south, following the path indicated by the returning messengers. The journey took 2 days, during which Eleanor observed the Apache warriors with growing appreciation. Their knowledge of the land was profound. They could read tracks invisible to her eyes, identify edible plants she would have overlooked, predict weather changes from subtle shifts in wind or scent. In the evening, around the small campfire, she found herself included in their conversation through Kianata's translations. The warriors asked thoughtful questions about white settlements, clearly trying to understand the society that increasingly pressed upon their territories. "Why white people always want more land?" asked Nahiosi, the oldest of the warriors. "They have many big towns already." Eleanor struggled to explain concepts of private ownership and expansion that seemed so natural in white society, but appeared baffling and unnecessarily greedy from the Apache perspective. "Our way's different," Kianata observed after her attempt. "Apache takes what needed for life. White man takes what wanted for tomorrow, and tomorrow after that, never satisfied." "Not all white people think this way," Eleanor said, though. She knew the distinction would mean little to those who had experienced the relentless push of settlement. "You different," agreed Nahayasi. "But one flower not make spring." On the morning of the 3rd day, they crested a ridge to see the cavalry encampment in the valley below. White tents arranged in military precision, horses corralled nearby, the American flag fluttering above the commander's tent. About 30 soldiers moved about the camp, their blue uniforms distinct even at a distance. Kianata signaled a halt. We approached slowly, open hands, no weapons showing. Eleanor's heart pounded as they descended toward the camp. She rode beside Kianata, the warriors following in single file. Halfway down the slope, sentries spotted them, raising an alarm that sent soldiers scrambling for rifles. "Keep riding," Kianata instructed calmly. "Steady pace. They see we come in peace." An officer emerged from the command tent as they approached the perimeter. He barked orders, and soldiers formed a line, rifles ready but not yet aimed directly at the approaching party. "That's far enough," the officer called when they were about 50 yards from the camp. "State your business." Kianata raised his empty hands. "I am Kianata, Chief of Shadow Water Apache. I bring teacher woman to speak with Commander." The officer's gaze fixed on Eleanor, surprise evident in his expression. He conferred briefly with another soldier, who hurried back to the command tent. Moments later, a tall figure emerged. Clearly the commander, his uniform adorned with the insignia of a captain. "I am Captain James Thornton, United States Cavalry," he called. "You may approach, the woman and the chief only. Your warriors. Stay there." Kianata gave instructions to his men, then he and Eleanor rode forward slowly. Eleanor sat as straight as possible, attempting to project confidence and composure despite her inner turmoil. As they drew closer, she could see the captain was perhaps 40, with a weathered face and a neatly trimmed mustache. His expression was guarded, but not overtly hostile. "Miss Blackwood, I presume?" he said when they stopped before him. "Your presence with this Apache band has caused quite a stir in the territory." "I imagine it has," Eleanor replied steadily. "Though I can't see why my personal decisions should concern the United States Army." The captain's eyebrows rose slightly at her directness. "When a white woman disappears into Apache territory, it generally means one thing: captivity. Your letter claims otherwise, but it could easily have been written under duress. As you can see, Captain, I am neither bound nor bruised." Eleanor gestured to herself. "I am here of my own free will, working as a teacher for the children of the Shadow Water Band." Captain Thornton studied her carefully. "Why don't you dismount and we can discuss this matter privately?" He glanced at Kianata. "Away from influences that might prevent you from speaking freely." Eleanor understood the implication and found it insulting, but she recognized the need to cooperate. She dismounted. accepting the captain's assistance with cool politeness. "Chief Kianata is not my captor, Captain. He is my employer, so you maintain. Please come this way." He led her toward his tent, positioning them so that Kianata remained in view but out of earshot. Eleanor noted the calculating nature of this arrangement, allowing her to see that the chief was being treated respectfully while ensuring their conversation remained private. "Now, Miss Blackwood, you can speak candidly," the captain said, his voice lowered. "If you are being held against your will, we can extract you immediately. Your safety is assured." "I appreciate your concern, Captain, but it is entirely misplaced," Eleanor replied firmly. "I entered into an agreement with Chief Kianata to teach his people for 1 year. In exchange, he provided payment that settled my father's debts and saved our trading post." The captain frowned. "You sold yourself to an Apache?" The characterization angered Eleanor. "I accepted a teaching position, Captain. The fact that my employer is Apache rather than white makes it no less legitimate. Forgive my skepticism, Miss Blackwood, but civilized women don't typically choose to live among savages. Perhaps your definition of civilized and savage requires reconsideration," Eleanor responded, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "I have been treated with nothing but respect by the Shadow Water people. Their desire for education, their complex social structures, their thoughtful governance, these are hardly the marks of savagery." Captain Thornton studied her with narrowed eyes. "You sound remarkably converted to their perspective." "I sound like someone who has had the opportunity to see beyond prejudice and discover truth," Eleanor countered. "The Shadow Water Band has maintained peace for 3 years, Captain. They are not the Apache who raided the farm near Silver Creek." This caught the captain's attention. "How do you know about that raid?" "Chief Kianata told me. He is concerned that your patrol might blame his people for actions they did not commit." "And you believe him?" "Yes," Eleanor said without hesitation. "I do." Captain Thornton paced a few steps, considering. "Your father confirms your story. We sent men to your trading post after receiving your letter. He was reluctant to discuss the arrangement, but admitted it was voluntary." Relief flooded through Eleanor at the news her father was all right. "Then you have no reason to doubt my word." "Perhaps not," the captain conceded. "But your presence here complicates matters. There are those in the territorial government who would use any excuse to void peace agreements with Apache bands. A white woman living among them, willing or not, provides such an excuse." The political implications of her choice became suddenly, painfully clear to Eleanor. Her personal decision carried weight far beyond her individual circumstances. "What would you have me do?" she asked. "Return to my father? Abandon my commitment?" The captain regarded her thoughtfully. "That would be the simplest solution." "But not the right one," Eleanor stated firmly. "I gave my word, Captain. Where I come from, that still means something." "Even when given to an Apache?" he challenged. "Especially then." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "If we expect them to honor agreements with us, should we not honor our agreements with them?" This logic seemed to register with the captain. He was silent for a long moment before responding. "You make a compelling argument, Miss Blackwood, but I must consider the broader situation." He glanced toward Kianata, who remained mounted, his posture relaxed but watchful. "I will not force you to return with us, since you clearly state your presence is voluntary. However, I must report this unusual arrangement to my superiors." "I understand," Eleanor said. "All I ask is that you also report that the Shadow Water Band had nothing to do with the raid near Silver Creek, and that they continue to honor their peace agreement." Captain Thornton nodded slowly. "I will include that in my report, but I cannot promise how it will be received." He straightened his uniform jacket. "Now, I would like to speak with Chief Kianata." The conversation between the captain and Kianata was conducted with formal courtesy on both sides. Eleanor observed with interest how each man adjusted his communication style to bridge the cultural divide, the captain becoming more direct and less verbose, Kianata employing more English phrases and Western concepts than he typically used with his own people. They discussed the raid near Silver Creek, with Kianata offering information about which Apache band might be responsible, a group from further west that had refused to sign any peace agreements with white authorities. My scouts say they move toward Mexico border, Kianata explained. 3 days' ride southwest from here. Captain Thornton considered this information, clearly weighing its reliability. If this proves accurate, Chief Kianata, it would be a gesture of good faith between us. Shadow Water people want peace, Kianata replied simply. Dead farmers, dead Apache, no one wins in this war. As they prepared to depart, Captain Thornton approached Eleanor one final time. Miss Blackwood, should your situation change, send word immediately. The Army maintains regular patrols in this region. Thank you, Captain, but that won't be necessary, Eleanor replied. I have made my choice. The captain tipped his hat. As you wish. But remember, circumstances can change quickly in Apache territory. The warning lingered in Eleanor's mind as they rode back toward the Shadow Water camp. The encounter had ended peacefully, yet she sensed that the balance remained precarious. Her presence among the Apache was now officially known to military authorities, with unpredictable consequences. That evening, as they made camp, Kianata joined Eleanor by the fire after the others had retired. For several minutes they sat in companionable silence, watching the flames. Captain believes your words, Kianata finally said, but does not understand your choice. Many wouldn't, Eleanor acknowledged. It doesn't fit their view of the world. Kianata nodded slowly. When bird raised by wolves tries to fly, wolves do not understand. When bird tries to hunt with wolves, other birds do not understand. He looked at her directly, the firelight reflecting in his dark eyes. You fly between worlds now, not easy path. No, Eleanor agreed, but perhaps a necessary one. Necessary, Kianata repeated, testing the word. Yes, like water in desert. Like knowing enemy's heart. He added another small branch to the fire. You teach our children English words. But you teach me something more valuable. What's that? Eleanor asked. That some white hearts can see truth, even when truth wears Apache face. He rose smoothly to his feet. This gives hope when path ahead looks dark. As he walked away, Eleanor realized that her journey had become something far more significant than a year of teaching in exchange for debt payment. She had unwittingly stepped into a space between cultures, between worldviews, a space where understanding might grow if given chance to root. The stars overhead seemed suddenly brighter, the night air clearer. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she had found purpose in this unexpected place, among people she had been taught to fear but was learning to respect deeply. Tomorrow would bring new lessons for her students and for herself. The path between worlds had only just begun to reveal itself. The seasons shifted subtly in the mountains, summer's heat giving way to autumn's cooler embrace. 3 months had passed since Eleanor's arrival among the Shadow Water people. 3 months of daily lessons, cultural discoveries, and growing connections. The once suspicious glances from tribal members had largely transformed into nods of recognition, sometimes even smiles of greeting. Eleanor stood outside her wickiup in the crisp morning air, watching golden leaves spiral down from the aspens that bordered the creek. Her appearance had changed with the seasons, her once formal dresses replaced by more practical attire, a blend of her own clothing and garments fashioned by the Apache women. Her hair, usually confined in a tight bun, during her previous life, now hung in a simple braid, adorned with a beaded leather tie given to her by young Elu. Teacher Eleanor. The call came from Tarek, racing toward her with uncontained excitement. At 9 years old, He had proven her most enthusiastic student, absorbing English words and concepts with remarkable speed. "Good morning, Tarek," she replied, smiling at his energy. "Why such hurry today? Big hunt starting." He gestured animatedly toward the center of camp, where warriors were gathering. 3 days in high mountains. Winter meat. Eleanor had learned that the autumn hunt was crucial for the tribe's survival, providing stores of preserved meat for the harsh winter months ahead. This would be the first major hunt since her arrival. "Will you go with the hunters?" she asked. Knowing boys Tarak's age sometimes accompanied warriors to learn essential skills, pride flashed across his face. "First time my father says yes. I help drive deer to waiting hunters." He looked at her hopefully. "No teaching while hunt?" Eleanor laughed. "I think we can suspend lessons for the hunt. But when you return, I want to hear all about it, in English." Tarak's face scrunched in concentration. "I will tell. Adventure story. When come back." His grammar remained imperfect, but his progress was remarkable for just 3 months. As Tarak dashed away, Eleanor made her way toward the central fire where much of the community had gathered. The atmosphere hummed with purpose. Women preparing travel food for the hunters, warriors checking weapons, elders offering advice about hunting grounds and weather signs. Nita approached, carrying a bundle of dried herbs. Over the months, she had become more than a cultural interpreter. She was now Eleanor's closest friend. Their initial caution replaced by genuine affection. "Big excitement today," Nita observed. "First winter hunt very important. Good hunt means enough food for cold moons. Will you go with them?" Eleanor asked. Nita nodded. "I help with preparing meat at hunting camp. Many hands needed." She studied Eleanor's face. "You could come too. See Apache ways beyond teaching Wickiup." The invitation surprised Eleanor. Though increasingly accepted within the community, she had rarely been included in significant tribal activities. Would that be appropriate? "I know nothing about hunting or preparing game," Nita smiled. "How you learn if never try? Kianata says you should see all shadow water life, not just children and cooking fires." The mention of Kianata sent an unexpected warmth through Eleanor. The chief's presence in her daily life had been both consistent and complex. He often observed her teaching sessions silently from the doorway, discussed her students' progress during evening walks by the creek, and ensured she had everything needed for her comfort and work. Their conversations had evolved from awkward exchanges to thoughtful discussions about their respective cultures, beliefs, and hopes for the future. "If the chief thinks it appropriate, then I would be honored to join the hunting party," Eleanor decided. When the hunting party departed 2 hours later, Eleanor rode near the middle of the procession beside Nita. 40 warriors led the way, followed by women who would establish the hunting camp and process the game. Children old enough to help but too young to hunt, like Tariq, traveled with their mothers, barely containing their excitement. Kianata rode at the front, his powerful presence setting the pace and direction. Occasionally he dropped back to check on different groups, exchanging words with elders or instructing younger warriors. When he passed Eleanor, their eyes met briefly, and he nodded with what seemed like approval at her participation. The journey took them higher into the mountains, the terrain growing steeper, the air thinner and cooler. By midday, they had climbed above the tree line into a realm of rocky outcroppings and alpine meadows. Eleanor marveled at the vista spreading below them, the patchwork of forests, the silver ribbon of the river winding through distant valleys, and the vast, limitless sky above. "Your world is beautiful," she said to Nita, the panorama taking her breath away. "Not my world," Nita corrected gently. "The world for all creatures to share." The distinction reflected a fundamental difference in thinking that Eleanor had been discovering throughout her months with the tribe. Where her upbringing emphasized ownership and dominion over nature, the Apache viewed themselves as part of an interconnected whole, neither above nor separate from the natural order. They made camp in a protected valley with access to fresh water and natural lookout points. The organization impressed Eleanor. Everyone knew their role without needing direction. Young boys gathered firewood, women established cooking areas, warriors scouted the surrounding terrain for signs of deer and elk. As Eleanor helped unpack supplies, grandmother's son approached, her weathered face solemn in the mountain light. Without words, she beckoned Eleanor to follow her away from the bustling camp. They walked to a small clearing where a circle of stones had been arranged. Grandmother's son indicated that Eleanor should sit opposite her, then reached into her medicine pouch and withdrew what appeared to be a small clay pot of red ochre. With practiced movements, she dipped her finger into the pigment and reached for Eleanor's face. Eleanor remained still, understanding this was a significant moment, though its meaning eluded her. The elder's touch was gentle as she traced patterns on Eleanor's forehead and cheeks. When she finished, she sat back and nodded with satisfaction. "What does this mean?" Eleanor asked quietly. Grandmother's son spoke in Apache, gesturing to the mountains around them, then to Eleanor's heart. Though the specific words were unknown to Eleanor, the intent seemed clear, a blessing or protection for the hunt, an acknowledgement of her participation in this important tribal activity. When they returned to camp, Nita gasped at the sight of Eleanor's face. "Grandmother has given you Hunter's blessing," she explained, her voice hushed with surprise. "Very rare for outsider. Is it appropriate for me to wear it? I won't be hunting. All who help bring winter food share in blessing," Nita assured her. "But grandmother rarely gives this to anyone not born Apache." She studied Eleanor's marked face with newfound respect. "She sees something in your spirit." That evening, as fires burned against the gathering darkness, the hunting rituals began. Warriors danced to the rhythm of drums, their movements mimicking the stalking of prey, the flight of arrows, the honor given to animals whose lives would sustain the tribe through winter. Eleanor watched, transfixed by the power and meaning embedded in each gesture. This was not performance but prayer, not celebration but communion with forces larger than themselves. Kianata appeared beside her, his presence sudden yet somehow expected. In the firelight, the planes of his face seemed carved from the mountain itself, strong, enduring, elemental. "Your face wears grandmother's blessing," he observed quietly. "I don't fully understand its meaning," Eleanor admitted. "Understanding comes in layers like mountain stones," he replied. "First layer, protection for hunt. Second layer, acceptance into circle of those who sustain tribe." He paused, his dark eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Third layer, grandmother, sees your true spirit, not just your white skin." "And what spirit does she see?" Kianata's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Spirit that walks toward truth, not away. Spirit that builds bridges where others build walls." His voice lowered. "Rare spirit in any people, Apache or white." Before Eleanor could respond, a shout went up from the edge of camp. A scout returned, reporting excitedly to the hunting leaders. Kianata excused himself to join the discussion. Nita soon explained the cause for excitement. "Large elk herd spotted in North Valley. Perfect place for hunt. We prepare before dawn." The night passed quickly, with Eleanor sleeping fitfully in a borrowed buffalo robe beneath the star-strewn sky. She woke before first light to find the camp already stirring, warriors painting their faces with hunting symbols, women preparing travel food, young boys like Tarek practically vibrating with anticipation. Kianata gathered everyone before departure, speaking words that Nita translated as a prayer for success, safety, and honor in the hunt. He reminded all present that they took animal lives not from desire but necessity, and that each creature that fell to their arrows would be fully used, its spirit respected. The hunting strategy became clear as they moved out. The main body of warriors would position themselves at strategic points along the valley, while younger men and boys would circle behind the elk herd to drive them toward the waiting hunters. "What will we do?" Eleanor asked Nita as they followed on horseback. "Women establish butchering camp downwind from hunting grounds," Nita explained. "When hunters successful, they bring meat to us. We work quickly before sun spoils any part." The efficiency of the operation impressed Eleanor. By mid-morning, the butchering camp was established beside a clear stream, ideal for cleaning meat and hides. From their position, they could hear distant shouts as the elk drive began, though the hunt itself remained out of sight beyond a ridge. Eleanor had expected to feel like an observer, but soon found herself fully engaged in the work. Under Nita's patient instruction, she helped prepare the area, laying out clean hides where meat would be placed, building smoking racks for immediate preservation, arranging knives and scraping tools. The first successful hunters arrived before noon, their horses laden with portions of elk. The women sprang into action, their movements practiced and efficient. Eleanor was assigned to help a pony, Nita's mother, who demonstrated how to cut the meat into strips for drying. "Like this," a pony showed, her hands skilled despite her age. "With grain, not against. Wastes nothing." Eleanor tried to mimic the technique, her first attempts clumsy compared to the Apache women's precision. Yet rather than mockery, she received patient correction, even occasional nods of approval as she improved. By mid-afternoon, the hunting camp bustled with activity. Warriors continued to bring in game. Children carried water and firewood, women processed meat with remarkable speed. Eleanor worked until her arms ached, her borrowed dress stained with blood and tissue. Yet she felt a strange satisfaction in the labor, the direct connection between effort and survival, the communal nature of the work, everyone contributing to the whole. As dusk approached, Kianata returned with the last hunting party, their success evident in the game they transported. He moved through the camp, checking on progress, speaking words of encouragement, ensuring the injured, 2 warriors with minor wounds from the hunt, received proper care. When he reached Eleanor, he paused, observing her bloodied hands and focused expression as she worked alongside a pony. "Teacher becomes hunter," he remarked, a hint of approval in his tone. Eleanor looked up, pushing a strand of hair from her face with the back of her wrist. "Hardly a hunter. Just trying not to waste the meat your warriors provided. All roles honor the hunt," Kianata replied. "The one who shoots arrow, the one who prepares meat, the one who tans hide for winter moccasins, all essential." He nodded toward her work. "You learn quickly." "I have good teachers," Eleanor acknowledged, glancing at a pony, who allowed a rare smile at the compliment. That night, with the day's hunt successfully completed, the atmosphere in camp transformed from focused industry to celebration. A feast was prepared from portions of the fresh game, and everyone ate their fill, a luxury Eleanor had learned was not taken for granted in a life where hunger always loomed as a winter possibility. After the meal, as stars appeared in the vast mountain sky, stories began around the central fire. Elders recounted hunting tales from years past, warriors described the day's adventures, and even children contributed with wide-eyed observations of what they had witnessed. Eleanor sat slightly apart, absorbing the scene with a historian's eye, committing details to memory to record later in her journal. 3 months ago, she could never have imagined herself here, face painted with ochre, hands raw from processing game, surrounded by people who by all rights should have remained strangers, but were increasingly becoming something like family. Kianata approached, offering a cup of fragrant tea brewed from mountain herbs. He settled beside her on the log. She had claimed as a seat, his presence both commanding and comfortable. "Your thoughts seem far away," he observed. "Not far," she corrected, "just reflecting on the journey that brought me here. How unlikely it all seems." Kianata considered this, sipping his own tea before responding. "Unlikely only if You believe path is straight line from birth to death. Apache know better. Path winds like river, moving around obstacles, finding new ways to same ocean. And what ocean are we all moving toward? Eleanor asked. Understanding, perhaps, he replied thoughtfully. Or wisdom that brings peace between your people and mine before both drown in blood. The starkness of his vision sobered her. Despite the night's celebration, the reality of their broader circumstances remained unchanged. Settlements expanding, cavalry patrols increasing, reservations being established across the territory. Do you believe that's possible? She asked. True. Peace between our peoples? Kianata was silent for a long moment, his profile strong against the firelight. I must believe, he finally said. Chief who loses hope cannot lead people toward better days. The hunt continued for 2 more days, resulting in enough meat to sustain the tribe through the coming winter, if properly preserved. Eleanor participated fully, her initial awkwardness giving way to increasing competence under the patient guidance of the Apache women. On the evening before their return to the main camp, Grandmother's son approached Eleanor again, this time accompanied by several tribal elders, including Makia, the medicine man who had initially opposed her presence among the Shadow Water people. Nita hurried to Eleanor's side to translate. They wish to perform ceremony, she explained, her expression serious. Very important, very rare for outsider. What kind of ceremony? Eleanor asked, a flutter of apprehension mixing with curiosity. Naming ceremony, Nita replied. Grandmother says you have earned Apache name. The significance stunned Eleanor. She had learned enough about Apache culture to understand that names carried deep meaning, often reflecting a person's character, notable deeds, or spiritual attributes. I would be honored, she said, hoping her response conveyed appropriate respect. The ceremony took place as the moon rose over the mountain peaks. The entire hunting party gathered in a circle, with Eleanor positioned in the center beside Grandmother's son. Makia built a small fire of specific woods that released fragrant smoke into the night air. The elders began a rhythmic chant there, voices blending in harmony that seemed to vibrate through the earth beneath Eleanor's feet. Grandmother's son once again applied ochre to Eleanor's face, this time in a different pattern that extended down her neck to her shoulders. Kianata stepped forward, his formal attire indicating the ceremony's importance. He spoke in Apache, his deep voice carrying clearly to all present. Though Eleanor couldn't understand the specific words, she recognized their cadence as something between proclamation and prayer. When he finished, he turned to face her directly. From this night forward, he said in English, clearly intending his words to be understood by all, you are known to Shadow Water people as Nahamana, mystic bridge between worlds. The name resonated through Eleanor like a struck bell, its meaning capturing precisely the role she had unexpectedly assumed. Not just teacher, not just visitor, but a connection between separate realities that had previously existed in isolation or conflict. Nayamana, she repeated softly, accepting the name and all it represented. The tribe responded with calls of approval, and the ceremony transitioned into celebration, drums beating, voices raised in songs that seemed to Eleanor both ancient and immediate, filled with joy and strength. Later, as the festivities continued around her, Eleanor found a moment of solitude at the edge of camp. The mountain night spread before her, stars impossibly bright in the thin air, the silhouettes of pines standing sentinel against the darkness. Does your new name sit well with you? Kianata's voice came from behind her, quiet yet impossible to miss. She turned to face him. It feels like a great responsibility. All true names carry weight, he agreed, moving to stand beside her. But name only recognizes what already exists. He gestured toward the distant horizon, bridge already forming between your understanding and Apache ways, between your heart and our people. And if the bridge leads nowhere? Eleanor asked. giving voice to her deepest concern. If the world beyond these mountains refuses to see what I've seen, learn what I've learned? Kianata was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the stars above. One stone doesn't make mountain, he finally said. But mountain cannot exist without first stone. He turned to look at her directly. You are first stone, Nahamana. Others may follow. The use of her Apache name created an unexpected intimacy between them, a recognition of transformation that went beyond words. There will be challenges when we return to camp, Kianata continued. Message waiting from military fort. New Indian agent appointed for region. Wants meeting with all chiefs. Eleanor understood the implications immediately. Indian agents represented the government's official policy toward native peoples. Some were fair-minded, others corrupt. All wielded significant power over tribal affairs. Will you go? Must go, Kianata replied simply. Refusing brings soldiers. He hesitated, then added, I would ask you to accompany me, as translator, as witness. The request surprised her. Wouldn't that complicate matters? A white woman. Living with the Apache is already controversial. Truth often complicated, he acknowledged. But agents should see shadow water people teach children white knowledge, prepare for future. You are proof of our commitment to finding path between worlds. Eleanor considered the potential ramifications. Her presence at such a meeting would indeed make a powerful statement, but it might also inflame those who disapproved of her choice. To live among the Apache. I'll come, she decided. If you believe it will help rather than harm your position. Kianata nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. We leave 3 days after returning to main camp. Fort meeting in 1 week. As they stood together beneath the vast night sky, Eleanor felt the weight of her new name, her new identity settling around her shoulders. Nayamana, mystic bridge between worlds. Not just a title bestowed in ceremony, but a purpose, a calling. That had found her when she least expected it. The hunting party returned to the main camp amid celebration. Children ran to greet returning parents. Elders emerged from wickiups to assess the hunt's success, and dogs barked excitedly at the commotion. The meat and hides were distributed according to tribal custom, with portions set aside for those too elderly or infirm to participate in the hunt. Eleanor's students swarmed around her, eager to share their experiences during her absence, and equally curious about her participation in the hunt. Young Elu noticed the fading ochre patterns on Eleanor's skin and touched them wonderingly. Teacher marked like Apache, she observed in her perfect English pronunciation. Teacher has Apache. Name now, Tarek announced proudly, having witnessed the ceremony. Nahimana, bridge between worlds. The news spread quickly through the younger generation, who tested the name on their tongues with varying degrees of success. Eleanor found herself responding to it naturally, as though a part of her had always been waiting to be recognized by this identifier. That evening, as she recorded the hunting journey in her journal by the light of a small fire, Eleanor reflected on the distance she had traveled, not just physically from her father's trading post, but spiritually and emotionally. From the woman she had been 4 months ago. She wrote not just of external events, but of internal transformations, how the concepts of community and interdependence had replaced her ingrained notions of individual achievement, how the Apache relationship with the natural world challenged her assumptions about mankind's dominion over creation, how the supposed savages of frontier legend had revealed themselves as people of profound wisdom, complex social structures, and spiritual depth. As her pen moved across the page, Eleanor recognized that she was documenting not just her experiences, but a potential bridge of understanding that might someday extend beyond her personal journey. In recording truth rather than prejudice, observation rather than assumption, she was creating something that might eventually open other minds as hers had been opened. The thought both humbled and inspired her. Naimana, perhaps the name recognized. Not just who she had become, but who she was meant to be. The journey to Fort Defiance took 3 days through increasingly contested territory. As they traveled, Eleanor noticed how Kianata altered their route to avoid settlements, keeping to higher ground where they could observe potential threats before being seen. Their party consisted of Kianata, 6 warriors, including the elder. Nahiosi, Nita as translator should Eleanor need assistance, and Eleanor herself, now dressed in a practical blend of her own clothing and Apache-made garments. Many eyes watched this journey. Kianata observed as they made camp on the second night, not all friendly. Eleanor had sensed the tension growing as they approached the fort. Twice they had spotted cavalry patrols in the distance, and once, they had detoured widely around a mining encampment where drunken voices carried on the evening air. "Will we be safe at the fort?" she asked. Kianata's expression remained impassive. "Fort has walls, soldiers, rules. Safety comes from wisdom, not walls." He studied the horizon thoughtfully. New Indian agent unknown quantity. Some agents respect treaties, want peace. Others take bribes, steal rations, create reasons for war. And you still think my presence will help rather than harm? "Truth is strongest weapon," he replied. "You are truth that cannot be hidden. White woman who lives among Apache by choice, who sees with clear eyes." His gaze met hers directly. "Some will fear this truth. Others will recognize path forward." Fort Defiance appeared on the horizon. Late the following day, a stark collection of wooden buildings surrounded by a palisade wall, the American flag flying above the central structure. As they approached, a sentry called out, and the gates opened to reveal a courtyard bustling with military activity. Captain Thornton emerged from the command building, his expression registering surprise at seeing Eleanor among the Apache delegation. He approached with measured steps, formality masking whatever thoughts might lie beneath. "Chief Kianata," he acknowledged with a nod. "Your promptness in responding to the summons is noted." His eyes shifted to Eleanor. "Miss Blackwood, I confess I didn't expect to see you here." "I serve as translator and witness for the Shadow Water people," Eleanor replied calmly, using the formal title she and Kianata had agreed upon for these proceedings. The captain's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed? Well, that's a matter you can discuss with Agent Harrington. He arrived yesterday from Santa Fe and is most eager to meet with the regional chiefs." He gestured toward a nearby building. "Your party may rest in the visitor quarters. The council begins tomorrow at midday." As they were escorted to their designated lodging, a simple barrack-style building normally used for visiting dignitaries, Eleanor noticed how the fort's inhabitants stared at their procession. Soldiers paused in their duties, laundresses whispered behind raised hands, and civilian contractors openly gawked at the sight of a white woman dressed in partial Apache attire, riding comfortably alongside a tribal chief. The quarters were sparse but clean, with separate sections for men and women divided by a hanging blanket. After settling in, Nita accompanied Eleanor to the fort's washing facilities, a luxury after days of travel. "People watch you much," Nita observed as they returned to their quarters. "Like strange animal in cage." "I'm breaking their rules without breaking any actual laws," Eleanor replied. "That confuses them more than if I simply violated regulations they could punish me for." That evening, as they shared a simple meal provided by the fort's kitchen, a messenger arrived requesting Eleanor's presence in the commander's office. Kianata nodded his permission, but his eyes conveyed caution. Colonel William Garrett, Fort Defiance's commanding officer, was a man in his 50s with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades in frontier postings. He rose when Eleanor entered, offering a seat with surprising courtesy. "Miss Blackwood," he began once she was settled, "your presence here represents an unusual situation. Captain Thornton's report mentioned your arrangement with the Shadow Water Apache, but I confess I remained skeptical until seeing you today. What aspect of my situation concerns you most, Colonel?" Eleanor asked directly. The colonel leaned back in his chair, studying her. Concern is perhaps not the word. Curiosity, certainly. It's not every day a well-bred, educated woman chooses to live among the Apache. He paused. Unless, of course, that choice was made under duress. My choice was made freely, Eleanor stated firmly, and has proven more rewarding than I could have anticipated. In what way? The question seemed genuinely interested rather than confrontational. Eleanor considered carefully before answering. I went to the Shadow Water people as a teacher. Colonel, I expected to give knowledge. What I didn't expect was how much I would receive in return. She met his gaze directly. Their cultural wisdom, their complex social structures, their profound connection to the natural world. These aren't primitive traits to be eradicated, but valuable perspectives that deserve respect. Colonel Garrett's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested her words had registered. An uncommon view, Miss Blackwood. Perhaps because few take the time to look beyond their preconceptions, she countered. The colonel nodded thoughtfully. I've served on the frontier for 27 years, Miss Blackwood. I've fought Apache, Comanche, Navajo. I've also negotiated treaties, shared meals with chiefs, and learned enough of their languages to know when translations are convenient rather than accurate. He leaned forward slightly. I've seen atrocities on both sides that would turn your stomach. I don't doubt it, Eleanor replied. But I've also seen the possibility of something better. The Shadow Water people have maintained peace for 3 years. Their children are learning English, mathematics, the skills they'll need to navigate a changing world. Under your tutelage, the colonel observed. Yes, by Chief Kianata's invitation and with fair compensation. Colonel Garrett seemed to make a decision. Agent Harrington is newly appointed from Washington. He has strong views about the proper management of Indian affairs, views shaped more by policy papers than frontier realities. He paused. Your presence tomorrow will undoubtedly disrupt his expectations. Is that a warning or encouragement, Colonel? A faint smile touched the older man's lips. Perhaps both, Miss Blackwood. I believe in honest dealing with the tribes. It has proven more effective than alternatives. But I am a military man who follows orders, even when I might personally question their wisdom. And Agent Harrington's orders? Consolidation. Moving scattered bands to designated reservation lands. Implementing civilization programs. The colonel's tone suggested his personal assessment of these policies. Tomorrow's council is ostensibly to introduce himself to regional chiefs, but in reality, it's to begin the process of relocation. The information sent a chill through Eleanor. She had heard of other tribes being forced onto reservations, lands typically too poor to support traditional lifestyles, too distant from ancestral territories to maintain cultural connections. The Shadow Water people will resist such measures, she said quietly. Most tribes do, the colonel acknowledged, which inevitably leads to conflict the army is then called to resolve. He sighed, the sound weighted with years of witnessed tragedy. It's a cycle as predictable as the seasons. It doesn't have to be, Eleanor insisted. There are alternatives. Coexistence, adaptation. Policy isn't made by those who understand tribal life. Miss Blackwood, Colonel Garrett interrupted gently. It's made by men in Washington who see numbers and maps, not people and traditions. As Eleanor returned to the Apache quarters, the colonel's words echoed in her mind. The council suddenly seemed not just a formality, but a potential turning point with far-reaching consequences. Kianata was waiting, his tall figure silhouetted against the lantern light. One look at Eleanor's face told him all he needed to know. Bad news comes, he stated rather than asked. Eleanor related the conversation with Colonel Garrett, watching as Kianata absorbed the implications. His expression remained composed, but she had learned to read the subtle signs of his concern, the slight tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible tension in his shoulders. "Reservation talk," he said finally. "This shadow has grown larger each season. What will you do if they insist?" Kianata's gaze turned inward, as though seeing possible futures unfold. Shadow. Water people need mountains, need forests, need sacred places where ancestors' spirits dwell. He looked at her directly. Land they offer is flat, dry, far from everything that makes us who we are. "You'll refuse," Eleanor concluded. "Not simple refuse. This brings soldiers." He made a balancing gesture with his hands that she had come to recognize as his way of weighing options. "Must find third path. Not yes, not no. Different answer." Sleep came fitfully that night as Eleanor's mind churned with worry. The stakes of tomorrow's council seemed suddenly higher than she had imagined, not just diplomatic relations but the very future of the people who had accepted her into their lives. Morning brought a flurry of preparation. Kianata and his warriors donned formal attire, not the theatrical war bonnets depicted in Eastern newspapers, but the genuine ceremonial garb of Apache leaders, adorned with symbols of personal accomplishment and tribal significance. Eleanor wore her most presentable dress, her hair arranged neatly, though she deliberately retained the beaded tie given by Elu, a small but visible symbol of her connection to the Shadow Water people. At midday, they were escorted to the fort's largest building, where the council would take place. Inside, a long table had been arranged with chairs on one side for government representatives and chairs opposite for tribal leaders. The uneven symbolism was immediately apparent. The government officials elevated and unified, the tribal leaders separate and lower. Kianata noted the arrangement with a glance but gave no indication of offense. He had explained to Eleanor earlier that Apache leaders observed everything, revealed little, and used every bit of information to their advantage. They were among the first to arrive. Soon other tribal delegations entered, representatives from 3 additional Apache bands, each with their own distinctive markers of identity and status. Eleanor noted the subtle acknowledgments between chiefs, the almost imperceptible gestures that established relative position and alliance. Kianata, she realized with quiet pride, was clearly accorded significant respect among his peers. A door opened at the far end of the room, and several white men entered. Colonel Garrett led the procession, followed by Captain Thornton and 2 civilian officials in formal attire. The last to enter was a thin man with steel-rimmed spectacles and a precisely trimmed beard. His suit appeared freshly pressed despite the frontier location, and his posture suggested someone accustomed to having his words given weight. "Agent Howard Harrington," Nita whispered to Eleanor. "Face like man who smells bad meat but pretends it's good." The observation was so apt that Eleanor had to suppress a smile. Harrington's expression indeed conveyed barely concealed distaste as he surveyed the assembled tribal leaders. His eyes widened noticeably when they fell on Eleanor seated beside Kianata. He leaned toward Colonel Garrett, whispering something that caused the colonel to shake his head slightly before responding in equally hushed tones. Colonel Garrett called the council to order with formal courtesy. Introductions proceeded around the table, each chief stating his name and band. When Kianata's turn came, he rose with innate dignity. "I am Kianata, Chief of the Shadow Water. Apache, we hold lands in the northern mountains by ancient right and recent treaty." He gestured to Eleanor. "With me is Nahimana, teacher to our children, translator of our words, witness to our truth." The use of her Apache name sent a ripple of reaction through the room. The other chiefs regarded her with new interest, while Agent Harrington's face flushed with poorly concealed displeasure. "Miss Blackwood," the agent interrupted, emphasizing her English name, "your presence at this council is irregular and unauthorized." Eleanor met his gaze calmly. "I am here at Chief Kianata's request, Agent Harrington, as translator and witness. My presence violates no regulation that I'm aware of. The Bureau of Indian Affairs provides official translators for such proceedings. Harrington replied stiffly. With respect, Eleanor countered. Translations can be influenced by perspective. Chief Kianata has the right to representation he trusts implicitly. Colonel Garrett cleared his throat. Perhaps we might proceed with the council's agenda, Agent Harrington. Time is limited, and these chiefs have traveled considerable distances. The agent's lips thinned with displeasure, but he nodded curtly. Very well. He adjusted his papers before addressing the assembled leaders. Gentlemen, I have been appointed by the Department of the Interior to implement the government's new policies regarding tribal management in this territory. Eleanor noted how his choice of words, tribal management, instantly reduced. Proud, independent peoples to entities requiring administration, like livestock or crops. The era of scattered bands roaming across vast territories is coming to an end, Harrington continued. Progress demands organization, efficiency, and proper utilization of resources. He spread a map on the table. The government has established reservation boundaries where your people will be relocated, provided with modern agricultural training, and educated in civilized ways. The chiefs remained expressionless, a silence that Harrington mistook for acquiescence rather than the deep offense it represented. Eleanor felt Kianata tense beside her, though his face revealed nothing. These reservations offer protection from settler encroachment, regular distribution of provisions, and schools for your children. Harrington continued. The transition period will begin in spring, with full implementation expected by year's end. When Harrington finished his presentation, the silence deepened. Finally, an elderly chief from a southern band spoke, his English halting but clear. This map shows our people moved 100 miles from ancestral lands, from mountains to flat country with little water. How is this progress? Harrington's smile was thin. The reservation lands are suitable for farming, which represents your future. Hunting nomadic lifestyles are simply not sustainable as the territory develops. Another chief pointed to the map. These boundaries cut through sacred sites. Places where our ancestors' spirits dwell. This cannot be accepted. I sympathize with your spiritual concerns, Harrington replied with transparent insincerity. But the boundaries have been established by survey teams considering appropriate land usage and resource allocation. Throughout the exchange, Kianata remained silent, observing. Eleanor recognized his strategy, allowing others to voice immediate objections while he gathered information and formulated a more comprehensive response. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of considered thought. Agent Harrington, Shadow Water people have honored peace treaty for 3 years. We trade fairly with settlers who respect boundaries. Our children learn English, numbers, reading. He gestured toward Eleanor. We prepare for future while honoring past. Why destroy? Path that leads to peace? Harrington's expression suggested he had anticipated this argument. Your adaptations are commendable, Chief Kianata. But individual arrangements cannot supersede federal policy. The reservation system provides for orderly relations between Indians and the expanding frontier. Orderly for whom? Eleanor found herself asking, unable to remain silent. All eyes turned to her. Harrington's narrowed with disapproval. This is precisely why unauthorized persons should not attend official councils. Miss Blackwood, you are not recognized as a participant. Then I speak as witness, she countered, drawing strength from Kianata's steady presence beside her. I have lived among the Shadow Water people for 4 months. I've seen their sustainable practices, their educational initiatives, their peaceful coexistence with cooperative settlers. The progress you propose would destroy functioning systems in favor of theoretical improvements. Your romantic notions of Indian life hardly qualify as expert testimony, Harrington dismissed. You are neither a government official nor a recognized authority on Indian affairs. She is recognized authority by Shadow Water people, Kianata stated firmly. Her words carry weight of truth seen with own eyes, not written in papers far away by men who never walked our lands. Several of the other chiefs nodded in agreement, creating a momentary unity that clearly unsettled Harrington. Colonel Garrett, who had been observing silently, chose this moment to intervene. Perhaps we should consider transitional arrangements for bands already demonstrating progress toward the government's objectives. His tone was diplomatic, seeking middle ground. The Shadow Water Apache appear to be implementing educational programs aligned with our goals, albeit through unconventional means. Eleanor sensed an unexpected ally in the colonel, whose frontier experience had clearly taught him the value of pragmatism over rigid policy. Harrington's face flushed with irritation. "Colonel, while I appreciate your military expertise, civilian Indian affairs are outside your jurisdiction. The policy is clear. All bands must relocate to designated reservations. And if we refuse?" asked one of the younger chiefs, his tone carrying an edge of challenge. The agent's response was chillingly matter-of-fact. Refusal would be considered hostile action against the United States government, with appropriate consequences. The threat hung in the air, its implications understood by all present. Military force, destruction, surrender or annihilation. The choice that had faced native peoples across the continent. Kianata rose to his feet, his movement deliberate yet commanding immediate attention. "I asked to speak with Agent Harrington and Colonel Garrett privately, with Naimana as witness." The request surprised everyone, Harrington most of all. He began to object, but Colonel Garrett intervened. "A reasonable request, Agent. Perhaps we could adjourn for 1 hour while you speak with Chief Kianata." Reluctantly, Harrington agreed.